Hi, I'm Bill Arnold. Thank you for listening to this podcast. There are many more podcasts available at myfaithradio.com. Your support makes this possible. Thank you. If you happen to work the third shift and wake up at 3 in the afternoon, well, good morning and welcome to...
Oh, don't you know, it's the Bill Arnold Show. It's Bill.
And a warm welcome to the Bill Arnold Show. Have you ever had thoughts that started with the words, if only? Those are big words, if only. That if you could go back and make a different decision, you would have. And is there a way that you could do that? That's the topic today with Jenita Pace. Jenita Pace has been part of Counselor's Corner and a regular guest for couple of years, and I'm always so delighted because I learned so much. And she is with me here in studio. Janita, this is going to be a great hour. Well,
Bill, it's always so good to be here, and I learned from you too. I mean, I think that's
thanks.
A give and take.
Thank you. Thank you. The if only thing, I think we're going to talk about regrets today. I have a feeling, as if only I'd not done that. Not that. That sounds like regrets. Is that true?
Yes. We're going to talk about the emotion of regret because I think I'm assuming we all have regret in some area of our life.
We think it's almost a necessity that we have some level of regret.
Yeah, I don't think we can live this life and not.
Yeah.
And, I was thinking about just in my own work how there's really two kinds that I see. And in order to get through this, we have to cling on to hope that there's a better way on the other side. And so one kind of regret is when we have something happen that was totally out of our control and we wish we could go back and change something. Like my husband has a traumatic brain injury, and 2 years ago he was showing symptoms of having something wrong, and I just kept, thinking, I think he's okay, and the doctors kind of kept pursuing, maybe we just do a few more tests, but I knew from some things that he'd gone through before that it looked like he was having a major injury to his brain. And I just kind of pushed away my instincts and assumed that, no, the doctors know best. And then by the time we finally figured out what was wrong, he had major brain damage. And I can't tell you how many times I had to regret thinking, man, if I could just go back and be more proactive, if I could just go back and make a different choice. And so I think we have those regrets where we didn't do anything wrong, but we wish we could just go back to that one moment where had we made a different decision, there would have been a different outcome. I don't know if you've had that before. You just think,
of course. Take
me back, give me a portal. I would sit myself down and say, Janita, you got to march in there right now and get that surgery for Tim. And I didn't. And so there's those regrets. And then there's the regret we have when we make a decision that, hurt someone. I remember when Tim was going through a hard time 10 years ago with his health, and Carter, my son, was 4, and I put him to bed, and I just started panicking because we didn't have the money to go to the doctor to get his diagnosis for his brain. And I just started crying and freaking out on Tim and just saying, this isn't the life I imagined. And all of a sudden, here comes 4-year-old Carter with a piggy bank. And says, I'm going to cry.
Oh, you're killing me.
And said, can I help, Mom? And I still cry. Like, there's that regret.
Me too.
That little person saying, Mom, I want to help. And I thought, oh my gosh, why couldn't I be that woman, that mom that just showed faith? It's all going to be okay. We're just going to pray. And so here's my little child offering his piggy bank.
That's so sweet.
I know. So I have regrets that have to do with not doing or doing something that I wish I would have changed the trajectory of an event in my life. And then I have things that I've regretted that I've done that I know hurt someone else. Mm-hmm. And those are the two kinds I see in my life.
Well, I have had people say to me, I have no regrets in life. And I think, well, you just haven't thought about it enough.
Right.
People don't want to be accountable for mistakes they've made in their life.
Right. I think it's really hard to look at our past mistakes because they've already happened. We can't alter what we've done. And then, like I said, every day that Tim is going through, his whole life has changed now. He can't work anymore, and he has all of these new symptoms he has to deal with. It was a lot for the first year to not beat myself up every day and say, if only. I think those are the words that regret brings, right? If only I had been more proactive, or I had walked into that doctor's office and said, we're doing the surgery now. My life, his life, my family's life would be different. Mm-hmm. And I think that's hard.
Yeah. I'm going to ask everyone listening, do you have a if only story? And would you be willing to share a piece of it? It doesn't have to be more than a couple sentences, but I think we're going to try to point towards putting some of this and handing it over to the Lord today, right?
Yes, that's where we're going.
I want to engage people to say, I have an if only moment in my life, and it's still haunting them, right?
Absolutely.
And I want to do church today with everyone who's got one of those if only moments.
That sounds amazing.
I'm not saying it's all going to go away, but I'm saying let's turn it over to the Lord, and over time, He will help.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if you have a if only moment in your life and you could share it, the text line would be 877-933-2484. Again, 877-933-2484. All right. When you told me Carter and the money, it kind of wiped me out. So I got to get my head back in the game here. So can you just review those two kinds of regret you were talking about?
Absolutely. Yeah. We have the, if only I had made a different choice. And these are things that we could never have known. And I've met people, and I've had my own stories where it's like, if only I hadn't taken that way to work, I wouldn't have gotten in that car accident. Of course. Or if only I had left earlier, I'd left later. And like I said, when my situation, if only I had pushed for that surgery, and my instincts told me he needed it, and I waited for too long. And so I think there are times when we go back and we wish so badly we just would have done something different. We couldn't have known. And then the second type is when we make an active choice. We hurt someone. We make a decision that in that moment when I panicked about us not having enough money. I mean, honestly, if I could go back, I wish I would have been that model mom of faith, like that Carter would have this memory of like his mom kneeling on the ground and praying and just trusting God for the finances to go to the doctor. But instead, my anxiety led my son to feel like helpless and overwhelmed my husband. And yeah, that story still tears me up because I can still see it. I can see it so clearly. And knowing that causing him anxiety. And so there's times when we're living in the moment of realizing that someone around us has been injured, and it's because we did something or we didn't do something. And we think, oh gosh, if only. I think as a parent, I think we all have a lot of those stories too.
Yeah. Jenita, how do we reconcile what you were talking about, the if only moment in life, with God's sovereignty?
Well, you know what is so interesting, and I didn't discover this until just a year ago, and it just blew my mind. I was thinking about regret, and I didn't realize that God himself says that he had a regret in Genesis. In Genesis 6, he has just created the world and humans for companionship and fellowship, and it wasn't many chapters later when everything is so evil, it's out of control. And so by chapter 6, the evil actions of people have just polluted the whole world. And there's an interesting passage, Genesis 6, 5-6. It says that the Lord saw the wickedness of the human race and that there was so much evil, and he was deeply troubled, and he said, I regret that I made them. And it's interesting because I didn't realize that God could feel regret. Like, I wouldn't think a sovereign being could actually feel regret. And so it's not that God made a mistake. I mean, it doesn't mean that he made a mistake, but he's acknowledging that we can have that emotion even if we haven't done anything wrong, even if we were on the path that was the right path.
Do you think that's why he put that in there?
I think so.
Because he can't have regret, but does he show us that we have regret?
I think he feels it. Like, I think regret is an emotion. And so I think what we're realizing is that regret, is a feeling. And it doesn't mean that anything is right or wrong. I mean, it can literally just be an emotion. And so for God to both know that he didn't make a mistake and to say, I feel that The sense of, I regret that this happened. I think it's just beautiful that we're talking to a God who understands. I would have a hard time talking to a God who was cold in this area and instructive. I love talking to a God who's emotional.
Already have a text that came in. If I only didn't have an addiction for so many years, I'm sure some relationships would have been better.
Yeah.
No question about that.
Oh, yeah. That breaks my heart because I've had my own journey with addiction, and I know, like, you look back and you think, gosh, if only.
I didn't know you had a journey with addiction.
Yes. I've had a journey with everything,
Okay.
though. I have been a train wreck.
Okay. I thought I did better show prep than that. Vet my guests better.
Oh, no, it's all good.
Oh, no, it's all right. I find it fascinating. I didn't know that you've been down that road, but thank you for being vulnerable.
Yeah, no, there's another regret. I regret that too, and having to go through a program and my husband having to help me through that. But I think the first thing just to realize for anyone listening that just because you feel regret, there's no sin in feeling that emotion. It's okay to feel that. And I think that God feeling it in that moment says, it doesn't mean he made a bad choice. It just means he felt it, that this was hard. Mm-hmm. It's an indication that something's really hard.
And there's plenty of very hard things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, Jenita, texts are coming in like crazy now.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
There's a lot of people suffering for if only.
Oh.
Yeah. You're hitting a nerve here.
Well, and I think the reason that this topic started coming to me is because I really got stuck when I'd watched Tim struggle every day, and that if only thought was just so hard on me. But I want to share the first piece of hope that I got through, and I hope as everyone's listening, to first of all just stop and realize again that regret emotion isn't a sin. It's not wrong to feel that. God felt it. Things are going to happen in your life even after this show that you're going to come back to a point where you feel regret and you feel that if only. But the first thing that I had to look at with Tim especially was that this isn't my story. I'm not writing this story. And you talk about wasted time. I have felt that parts of if only, now I've got all this wasted time. If only Tim was better, then we wouldn't be, quote, wasting the rest of his life with this injury. But it was neat. One night God showed me, he had me draw like a line that had no end and then a little dot and showed me the dot is your life on the spectrum of eternity. So you think you're, my addiction, you think your addiction wasted all those years, but Jenita, that's not there's no wasted time. Time is never wasted because God has time. And it was such a comfort to me because I think that was the fear I was living in, is that, God, I'm losing time. There could be so many more, I could use this time better. And for God to just show me that he's a slow God and he has all the time in the world. Mm-hmm. But I don't like that. I really don't.
I get it. I use a story a couple times a year when I speak to people in recovery. And it's not a biblical story, but it's just one that really sticks with people, where God has this conversation with this guy and he says, I want you to push against this huge boulder. So he does. And he wakes up that next day and pushes, and gets up the day after that and pushes. And then 3 months pass, 6 months pass, a year passes, and now he's fed up. He rages out to God and says, you asked me to push against this boulder. I've been doing it for a year, and I haven't been able to move it an inch. And God said, I didn't ask you to move it. I asked you to push against it.
Wow, that's beautiful.
Now you learned how to be consistent. You've learned perseverance. Oh. You've learned strength. You've learned discipline. Now I'm ready to use you.
Yeah.
So we always race to our own conclusions as to what we think things should be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I sat in Tim's office as we cleaned it out because he was a pastor, loved his job, and I was really wrestling with God, telling God, I told my kids, bury my journals with me because some people publish their parents' journals, don't do that. And my journal was full of God, you're wasting my husband's gifts. You're wasting.
He's a pastor.
He was a pastor. Yeah. God, you're wasting this. And I'm angry that, why would you not use him in ministry? And yeah, I pointed the finger at him. You're wasting this beautiful gift. It is fascinating, though, that God doesn't look at us. He doesn't see the word waste when he looks at time or suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And so I clung to Hebrews 12:2-3, which just says, "Let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured so much opposition from sinners, so that you'll not grow weary and lose heart." And I love that picture that Jesus is offering us, that he had so many painful moments in his life. And I can't imagine if there was pain that he felt in Genesis 6 from watching the evil of the world.
Mm-hmm.
But to have what's so beautiful is the joy set before him was us. So isn't it amazing that what motivated him to push through all this hard was his envisionment of loving us? Because we were the joy, like we're the inheritance he's getting. And so you flip that upside down, and now he's the one that we're focused on as we're going forward. And I need that perseverance. I need him in front of me at all times.
Quick question before we go to break, Jenita. Question how your hubby got his traumatic brain injury.
Oh, he's very special. He has a huge cyst. He only has half a brain. He's a medical miracle. But that cyst grew to the point that it crushed.
Okay.
Good. Yeah. So there's nothing we can do to fix that.
He wasn't born that way, was he?
He was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So, but the shunt failed. There was a shunt that was supposed to be draining the fluid, and it failed. So we didn't know it failed.
All right. We're going to take a break and come right back. Jenita Pace is my guest. You may remember her from being a guest on the show many times and also part of the Counselor's Corner. And we're talking about those words, if only. And if you have an if only story and you'd be willing to share it on the text line, we will keep you anonymous. We won't bring up names, but we'd be curious to see what your if only story is, because we want to try to work on letting that go and helping you give it over to the Lord and not have that be part of your history or anything that occupies your mind anymore. Is that fair? Yeah, that's totally fair. All right. We'll be right back. 877-933-2484. That's the text line. It is my deepest desire that you take the very first step of faith by placing your faith and trust in Jesus Christ. If you've got questions about what it means to begin a relationship with Jesus, text the word faith to 41224. I'm back with Jenita Pace. She really helps in people with depression, anxiety, trauma, PTSD, and self-harm behaviors. You kind of do it all.
Yeah, well, like I said, my life has been very chaotic. So I think God has allowed me to hopefully bring that into redemption in my office.
You can learn more about her at 3riversmn.com. 3 Rivers, THREE, Rivers, RIVERS.com. 3riversmn.com.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. And my email's jenitapace@gmail.com, and that's always a great way to find me too.
Okay. Well, let's get back to if only. We've got a bunch of stories coming in, Jenita. Here's one that if only I had asked my dad to write down the history of his family and of the community where he lived. He lived in the same house until he was 90, and obviously he's gone now.
Oh. Yeah, those are the kind of things that are so hard, because it's not that, he or she did anything morally wrong. It's when you go back in your mind and you just wish you would have taken a different road. And I've had to wrestle with this idea that God is the author of my story, because there's so many times when I go back to him and I say, I would write this different. You didn't take my suggestion. You didn't take what I felt was the right road.
Jenita, what about when you feel a prompting and you think, oh, I got to call Jenita, and then I don't do it because I've got something else, and then a couple of weeks pass, and then I hear something terrible. And I go, oh, I wish I would have called her 2 weeks ago when I felt prompted to do it. Is that the Holy Spirit prompting me, or am I not paying attention, or am I not listening? What's going on?
I honestly think, for myself anyway, I realize that I really give myself more power than I think I have. It's not that I don't have choices, but there's times where I've had a client leave my office and I thought, oh gosh, if only I had said that one thing.
Sure.
And I've had to realize that if God isn't the parent in the room that sees what that phone call should be made, but is like, well, I guess you didn't do it and now you're going to get punished. I mean, that would be so mean as a parent if I sat and watched my child miss something, knowing that they really wanted to know. And I just decided that too bad for them. Again, I go back to what is a good parent. God calls them our father. And so I've had it where like one time I realized, Tim didn't get a call from someone who was in crisis, and he felt terrible about it. And a different pastor took the call, and that turned out to be the right pastor to go.
Okay.
And so it's kind of realizing that God is so much bigger than we are, and we think we know what should happen. And but I think that's where, when he steps into the room and he's so big and so grand, it changes things. But that's not flippant. I'm not saying that's easy. It's really hard to accept.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when I feel pretty confident that I know better. I'm going to be... There's so many times where I've told God, this seems like the wrong direction. Honestly, this doesn't feel right. But
You've shared that with God more than once.
I have.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful that the Psalms has it all over the place.
All over the place.
I know. Isn't that great? He put it in his word so we can see that all through humanity, we've all been saying that at some point.
Mm-hmm.
Why, Lord?
Yeah. Let's just look back at that Hebrews passage one more time, Hebrews 12. But let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us. Now, you're saying this is not our story. Again, what does that mean?
I think that what's so beautiful is that God is the one that marked the race, and it's for us. I like how it says that. We didn't make the race. And I think what's so beautiful about, like, your story about the rock is that we don't know all of the facts. I had this dream. I don't dream divine dreams all the time, but I remember having this dream one time that there was this book and it was beautiful. And in the dream, I knew it was my life. And so I went up to look at it and God was next to me. And I remember in the dream thinking, oh, it's going to be like chronological, like it's going to be a road with markers. And I opened it and it was too complex for me to understand. There were charts and graphs and it was beautiful. It was all gold writing, but it was page after page after page. And I couldn't understand what I was looking at. And it was like God was showing me, I have taken into account things you don't even know. I've taken into account things that you'll never know. And so the question is, do you trust that I'm taking into account things you don't know? And I've had to answer sometimes, honestly, not really.
Yeah, it's very honest.
It's not
super
really.
Honest.
Yeah. But time and again, when I look at the passages and the stories of the Bible where, like Joseph being thrown into prison, that seems like the wrong direction to
It's
become
just
a
what
king.
I was thinking. Yeah.
I mean, it's the wrong direction.
Yeah.
God just tends to take us on directions that seem wrong at the time.
Sometimes he doesn't spare us from being thrown into the lion's den, but he spares us once we're in the lion's den.
Yeah.
Or Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He didn't keep them from getting thrown into the
No.
furnace. He showed up when they were in the furnace.
Yeah.
To me, that's comforting.
It really is, isn't
Yeah.
it? That we're,
Because there's people today that are in the furnace.
yeah.
Or they're in the lion's den and they just feel like their life is falling apart. And I want to say God can and will spare you
Yeah.
from what you're going through.
I know one of the passages that I always kind of cringe about, but I really do love is the equation of suffering produces perseverance, character, and character hope.
Yeah.
And the hope in that word hope in the Greek, it isn't like a wishful thinking like on a star. It's actually, think of it like you're in a lifeboat and you know a ship's coming to get you.
Mm-hmm.
It's that assurance that we know it's coming. And so it's not this emotional roller coaster. It's an assurance that there's an end date. And I really want that hope. I don't like the equation to get there, though.
Yeah, it's a certainty.
It's a certainty.
Yeah. We're talking with Jenita Pace, and we're talking today about the if only. If you had that in your life, if only moment. And if you're willing to share it, we certainly would appreciate it. Of course, you can remain anonymous. Here's one, Jenita. If only I had taken my daughter's cell phone away when she was a preteen. That's problematic for many. She was creating profiles on unknown sites, and someone thought she was a boy. And they kept identifying her as a boy, and she kind of went along with it. Now she's in her 30s, and she takes hormones and has transitioned to a boy.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, those are the moments that you wish you had the portal. Again, what I think is, I remember one time arguing with God about, especially as a parent, you look back and you think, if only I had done this, then they would have turned out this way. You know, that's one reason the prodigal son story is so breathtaking as a parent. If I was a neighbor and I was watching this dad who had a son who said, "Give me my money, I'm leaving you. You can't die fast enough," and you knew the son was going to go use the money to destroy himself, I wouldn't give him the money as a parent. I would tell the neighbor, "Don't give him the money. Like, he's going to go destroy himself."
Yeah.
And that's what the father does. He gives him the money, which then he goes and
free will.
Yeah, he goes and destroys his life. But he waits for him. And there's that heartbreaking picture of this father, this really good father, waiting for this kid. And I've had to go back to my mind to that moment where I can't imagine that God, being the great God he is, would provide a tool for this person to hurt themselves. And at the same time, he's been showing me, Jenita, that was in your kids and it came out, but you didn't put it there. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, the father didn't put the desire to become homeless in the son's heart, but he saw it. And without that, maybe no one would have ever known that was in there. And so God has been revealing to me so oftentimes that I want to, as a parent, control what my kids have or don't have. I want to make sure that I'm protecting them. But there is a point where God is showing me he's got a shovel and he's going to dig into their hearts. And the way that things come out can be really, really hard. So that story amazes me because, again, if I was the neighbor, I would have gone over and explained to the dad why, according to counseling, you should not be giving this child this kind of money. This is a bad decision at his developmental level. But God has this way of letting him go and waiting.
I always marvel at that story.
I do too.
Yeah. Because the dad didn't take the son into his office at his house and write him a check.
Yeah.
I mean, there had to be some distribution of
Yeah.
land or property, cattle, sheep, whatever he had.
Yeah.
And I'm sure he became a little bit of a, maybe even a laughingstock with other men in his community. You're doing what?
Of course.
You've got to sell something off.
Right. And this kid is saying, "You're not dying fast enough. Give me my money."
Yeah, right.
That's hurtful. And yeah, it's really against what we would assume would be the right thing to do.
Yeah. Maybe in more recent times, we could imagine having a 60-year-old cabin in the family.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the cabin everybody loves. It's the most awesome cabin. And one of your siblings wants his inheritance, so dad sells the family cabin to give him the money, which he goes and wastes.
Yeah, he goes to Vegas and gambles away.
And he's
And someone could say, well, the dad created the addiction because he gave him the resources.
Mm-hmm.
But I think what I'm learning so much is that God already sees things in people's hearts, and he knows that they're going to bubble up.
Yeah.
But again, as a parent, oh my gosh, I remember, sorry, Carter, another story. I think he's listening, so he's probably like,
"Hey,
oh my
Carter,
gosh, Mom.
You're amazing."
But I remember he'd been in school for years, and I felt like a good parent because I kept coming to him every day and saying, "Hey, if you need help with your homework, let me know." Because he'd been struggling with ADHD, and 3 years later, he said, "When you tell me that every day, it makes me think you don't think I can do this."
Really?
So here I thought I was being a great parent. And so just for all the parents listening, we do the best with what we have at the time, and we don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, there was some if-onlys right there.
Yeah. I think I was getting B's, and then my mom helped me with my homework. Then I was getting C's.
That's fair.
Yeah.
That's totally fair.
All right. We're going to take a break and come back. Jenita Pace is my guest. We're talking about if-only stories, and if you have one and you're willing to share it, the text line is open. You can, of course, remain anonymous. There's no names attached. 877-933-2484. What we want to do is, at the end, have you turn this over to the Lord and give this if only story to him. So we'll be right back.
Bill needs a minute. He needs a minute. Bill needs a minute. He'll be right back. Bill needs a minute. He just needs a minute. Bill needs a minute. He'll be right back. Bill took a minute, and now he's back.
I'm here with Jenita Pace. She's a licensed professional counselor here in the state of Minnesota, and she can be discovered at 3riversmn.com, THREE, riversmn.com. We're talking about if only. Before we get to that, I want to just take a little detour. I had a friend send me this today. I once asked a therapist why resting is so hard for me. She said, because you confuse rest with being unproductive and being unproductive with being unworthy.
Yeah.
I can never unhear that.
That's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah. All right, let's get back to if only, and let's talk about sin having no power. That is a very exciting thought.
Well, yeah, like I said, like the first kind of regret is when you wish you could go back, and you could have that moment where you did something different. And this has more to do with sin, where we, like I said, that moment where, excuse me, I'm so anxious that I panic, and I hurt my child. And I've had so many instances where I knew I did something wrong, and it injured someone else. And one passage that always speaks to me is Hebrews 4:14 through 16, where it says, "Therefore, since we have such a great high priest, Jesus, who ascended into heaven, let us hold firmly to the faith we profess. For we don't have a high priest who's unable to empathize with our weakness, but we have one who's been tempted in every way, just like us, but didn't sin. So let us approach God's throne of grace in confidence so that we can receive mercy and find grace to help us in our time of need." And I love that because I'm so appreciative that God has empathy for when we sin, not harshness. And I think growing up, I always pictured God's throne room as very cold. But the idea that the doors are wide open, there's this eagerness to have us come in and receive mercy, which is, unmerited favor and grace. And I think that's in that presence of facing our sin in a way that we know that we don't have to be ashamed. And I wrestled with God about this because I sin a lot. And so I have a lot of things that I have to think through. And I remember one time I have a temper. I really struggle with my temper. And I was working as an assistant principal at a school, and I had a teacher that really bothered me. She wasn't very productive. She was late. I mean, she just didn't do her job. And so I'm in the middle of the hall. I've got students all around me asking questions. And then she came up and asked me something that I'd already told her. And in front of all the other students, I yelled at her. And I yelled at her so severely that after she walked away, one of the students said, "Dang, Miss Pace, that was harsh." So all the all of the students froze and watched it. And she walked away crying. And I thought, oh my gosh, like she knows I'm a Christian. I've been trying to work on my temper. So I went to her office and I just said, I'm really sorry. Like that was totally uncalled for. And I have a problem with my temper, and I'm a believer in the Bible. And so I'm working through it. And she'd never had anyone apologize to her before. She was shocked. And we started talking about the freedom that it is to make mistakes in the faith that I was in. And it was the first time I realized that without making mistakes, people can't see the gospel. There's no way to conceptualize what it's like to be forgiven if we don't actually mess up.
Mm-hmm.
And so in a weird way, our faith is upside down, where we have to make mistakes in order for people to see how this works. And I'm not suggesting that listeners go out and sin so they can practice this, but I am saying that if you go back to the moment that you messed up, it's incredible how that can actually be the source of your gospel transformation. But if you don't screw up first, there's no way for this to be seen. And it was totally revolutionary for me.
I appreciate that story. I've done that a couple times myself.
Yeah.
Where I've gone back into a store or a place where I said, I don't like how I spoke to you, and I'm sorry.
Yeah. It just shocks people.
It does. It's humbling, and it's also the conviction level was so high.
Yeah.
When I walked out and I thought, oh my, I call myself a Christian?
Right.
That's not cool.
Yeah.
So I went in and I said, I'm just so sorry the way I spoke to you. That was inappropriate, and it's not how I want to treat you, and I'm sorry.
I think my favorite story that just exemplifies this is in Luke, where Jesus is having dinner with all of these high-profile men in town, and this woman who is a prostitute crawls up and cries so hard at his feet that she's washing them with her tears, and she's drying his feet with her hair, and everyone in town has judged her. I'm sure she has lots of regrets as I'm thinking about her as a person. But I love that Jesus stops the dinner and asks the men at the table, if two people owe money, one owing $1 million and one owing $10, and he forgives them both, who will love him more? And they said, well, of course, the person that owes $10 million. And then he stops and he turns away from everyone at the table and looks at her and says, did you see this woman? And talks about how because she was forgiven much, she loves much. And so it's a beautiful upside down picture where the more we sin, the more we're forgiven, the more we love deeply. And that's what we're called to do. So for anyone listening that is constantly living in the regret of their sin, I know it can be hard, but man, that can be the most beautiful redemption piece of your story.
And that passage from Hebrews is outstanding. That was Hebrews 4, verses 14 to 16. And I appreciate Jenita talking about how God can sympathize with us in our weakness. It's powerful.
I'm so grateful that he does. That he lived it so that he's not up on a, judging me, but he's really in it with me.
And the passage, verse 47, is that the same?
That's from Luke. And
That's from Luke,
yeah,
yes.
And I think it's Luke 5. Oh, I can't remember what chapter that story is in. I'd have to look it up. The woman who Jesus, his feet is washed by her. But that's like one of my favorite. I'm so appreciative for that woman. And imagine if she hadn't been a prostitute and hadn't been that broken, and she hadn't been to the place that she was that sinful, she needed to do that, we wouldn't have this story. So weirdly enough, we needed her to be so broken to be blessed for the rest of the centuries. It's really incredible how sin can become the power of the gospel.
Yeah. If there's no sin, there's no gospel, right?
There's no gospel.
Yeah, that's kind of a relationship that goes together.
Yeah. But I don't like that because I don't want to mess up.
Well, I don't either.
Yeah.
But we also don't want to spend time in sin management. We talked about that in hour 1 today with Dave Ryerson, and we don't want to spend time in sin management. We want to be free from the power of sin, which happens when we put our faith in Christ.
Yeah.
That sin power is broken, but then we have to just trust in the Lord every day.
Yeah. And I think it's so, God kind of gave me this picture because I don't know if anybody listening has ever remodeled a house, but painful to rip apart walls and take down things, and things aren't to code, and it's nasty surprises. And I felt like I was kind of showing me, you're like a house that I bought that you thought you were a pretty well put together house, and little did you know that you were about to fail all the inspections. I moved in knowing there was nothing to code, and I'm not in a hurry. And so God is like, in the house, my heart is this house that's like needs remodeling, and he's peeling wallpaper off and going, room to room really slow. And I want it done now because I want to get it done. But I love how if I welcome people to see the mess and they watch it slowly transform, it's the process of showing the power of the gospel. And I'm learning to have to live in that space.
That's awesome. All right, let's spend some time asking if there's anyone that has just joined the program that has an if-only story, because we've gotten a lot of stories, and we want to pray at the end of the show that we can take these if-only stories, especially the ones that have been pestering you.
Yeah.
Because that's kind of what they do, don't they?
Oh, gosh. Yeah, they follow you around. I know they do. I call them the bad movies. They come back in living color in my head. Yeah.
So if you have an if-only story where you would like to go back and make a different decision, and that's something in your life that gets replayed over and over in the bad movie department, and you can send us over what it is. We'd like to just present it to the Lord. We're going to leave your name out of it, of course, but if you want to get something to send over, that was an if only story. The text line is 877-933-2484. We're going to take a break with Jenita Pace, and we'll be back in just a minute. We carry each other's burdens. Please know you can bring us your prayer concerns and we will pray. Share your prayer requests with the Faith Radio team by texting or calling 877-933-2484 or share your prayer requests with the Faith Radio staff and listeners at myfaithradio.com. I'm back with Jenita Pace. We're talking about if only. Do you have one of those moments in life where you had thoughts that starts with the words if only? And had you been in a place where you would do anything to have it back so you could make a different decision? That's something that probably we all have something in our past that we can give over to the Lord. So let's talk about some strategies to fight regret, Jenita.
Well, I'm so grateful that God is such a model in the Bible for us. And what I found so interesting is at the end of the flood story, the flood, it's interesting at the end of the flood story, it doesn't say that man would never be evil again. And so God puts a rainbow in the sky to remind him. And I think it's just impactful that God needed a reminder. Like if he puts a physical reminder for himself. And so I think if he needs physical reminders, how much more do I need something tangible and physical to remind me of these truths? And so I always encourage people, we see God do this all through the Bible where he has the Israelites stack up rocks to remember something, or we take communion and we do baptism. So God is very much about creating something that we do or we look at in order to remember. And so I encourage my clients and I work with myself to find things that I can use to remember. Because the truth is that feeling of regret is never going to be, it's going to come back. It bounces in and out. And so how do I go back where I remember by looking at something? Or for me, the image of the lion is so powerful. And that's an image that I use sometimes to drive out some of those regrets, to remind myself that this isn't my story. And if I think I'm actually the author choosing the way this goes, then I'm forgetting that I'm walking into the presence of a God who already has done all the math on things I'll never know. Mm-hmm. And so that's one of my visual reminders.
That's really good. Here's a nice comment. This is an amazing and much needed show. I have more if-onlys than I could ever begin to truly count. So I would have to say of my if only I had listened to the Spirit of God so many times.
Isn't it beautiful that God, all those times that we're like, oh, if only I would have listened to you. But again, we go to that woman that's weeping at Jesus' feet. I just so love her. I think she probably wished her whole life she wouldn't have done the things she did. And gosh, and yet I'm thankful that her life was so broken. We have her story.
Mm-hmm. Jenita, let's talk a little bit more about reminders. You have a lion that you oftentimes think of. What else is there out there that you could encourage people with?
I also bought you can get these Egyptian tear, they're Egyptian perfume bottles, and that's what like David probably was thinking about when he was talking about God recording our tears or saving them.
Yeah.
And so I have one that I leave out.
Okay.
And it's a reminder to me that on the days that I'm weeping about mistakes that I've made, that God is collecting them, honoring that. And it doesn't mean, again, that I am not on the right trajectory, but it just is a reminder that God is empathetic in this. I think it's so beautiful that he saves our tears. It makes me think of when Carter was little, I saved every little art project he did. And I think that we're going to get to heaven and be shocked how God tracked everything about us because he's so in love with us. Everything, you know?
You had a very sweet story about Carter to start the show. Do you have something else to add to that discussion?
Well, you know what's
'Cause he's
interesting?
21 now.
Yeah, he's in Bible college. And right before I got here, he was writing an essay for one of his Bible classes. And he sent to me the essay, and it was about, he was reflecting how he went through so many years feeling like he was too sinful and he wasn't good enough. And then he wrote this. What I would tell someone now going through this is straight out of the Bible. These are the words that refer to us: justified, Romans 5:1, righteous, 2 Corinthians 5:21, forgiven, Colossians 1:14, set free, John 8:36, new creation, 2 Corinthians 5:17, more than conquerors, Romans 8:37. He said, these are all characteristics from the Bible used to describe someone who's given their life to Jesus. So constantly repeat these truths to yourself and focus on how great our Savior is rather than our sin, because that draws us back to the gospel, that though sin is real, Christ's sacrifice is greater, and through him we are forgiven, made new, and bought.
Beautiful.
I know. So as I'm driving, he sends this to me and says, this is what he realized today. And I thought, that's perfect.
I got to get this Carter on the show. That is talent.
But I loved the words that he came up with: justified, righteous, forgiven, set free, new creation, and more than conquerors. So I think, if we can put our sin in the same room as Christ, one is definitely bigger than the other.
So when you feel that emotion, you say that that regret isn't reality. It's just an emotion.
It's an emotion, yeah. And I think oftentimes we think our emotions are leading us to truth, but honestly, there's times where I've regretted something that I actually knew later that it was the right thing. So we can even regret what we did that was right.
And then you don't want to ignore it, you say, but you don't want it to run your life. And I think that's a very important point, Jenita.
Yeah. Like you said, when I meet someone who says I have no regrets, I'm actually kind of wondering to myself, do you have no regrets, or have you just not slowed down to think about?
Or are you in that big of a denial?
Right. Have you not actually sat with yourself and realized that there are many points that you maybe wish you could go back?
So we just have a couple minutes left. I know that there's a lot of people that have said, oh, that's me, those if-only stories. I've got a number of them, and there are some that are longer, that they're hard to read all of them on the air, but I appreciate you sending them over. Jenita, would you pray for everyone that's got the if-only regret today?
Yes, and if your listeners, Bill, if you'd be willing to send those on to me, any that, I would love to pray tonight for all the people that wrote in, because I wish I could have coffee with every single person and hear their story. But
a lot of coffee.
That's okay. I might regret it later, though. That much coffee.
Bouncing off the walls all night, not being able to sleep.
But let me pray for you, listener. Let me pray. Jesus, the truth is that when you adopted us, you knew exactly what this story looked like. And you are never surprised by anything that happens in our life. We're surprised, but you're not. And so, God, I pray for every person listening that the minute that those words, if only, that instead they'd be replaced with, even though. Because, God, the truth is that you saw that part of the story. You already knew it. And, God, that nothing is lost in light of the cross, in the presence of God, in that throne room of mercy and grace. God, sin has no voice. And so, Jesus, for every person to feel the redeeming power from their past, and to know, Jesus, too, that just like with Tim, there's things that I wish had gone differently in my life. But Lord, you've written the story, you're authoring this. And God, that we trust that even when we feel like we're going the wrong direction, somehow, Lord, we're going to end up in the right place. So Jesus, for you have limitless time. You have all the patience. God, you are willing to sit in the mess. You're not going anywhere. And for the listener that's here with us, they were meant to be here tonight. I just pray for freedom from that, if only. In your name, amen.
Amen. And Jenita, let me just wrap it up with something here that you've said that's so important. It's not your story, it's his. And he already considered and calculated your misstep as part of the eternal story.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. All right, Jenita, thank you so much. Jenita Pace, Jenita. Pace is Pace. You can learn more about her at 3 Rivers MN. That's THREE, riversmn.com. That's our show for the day. Thank you so much for spending time. Thanks to Ryan, who helped out in the studio today. And we will see you tomorrow for Guy Talk. And if I'm in a good mood, I think I'm going to buy him pizza. And if they're listening, maybe not. See you tomorrow. Thanks for listening. Programming like this is made available through your support. Information available at myfaithradio.com.